Hey there, you're watching All 24 News World News program broadcasting to you live from Algiers. To the headlines. In yet another bloody Zionist massacre in Gaza Strip, 14 killed in 8 line attacks. Meanwhile, Gaza government media office fears thousands of infants may die under siege, and the WHO warns of alarming malnutrition levels. Also in our news tonight, the calls to reject normalization are growing as Zionist influence expands in Morocco, and Al-Makhzen authorities are reported to be coercing businesses into normalization. Later on, Sudan's army pushes to secure Khartoum amid political turmoil. Arab League warns against illegitimate government, and Al-Fashir hits breaking point. And a surrender. France fumes as EU-US trade deal exposes divisions within the European bloc, and Paris' bid for European autonomy collapses. This and more shortly. Hello again, great to have you with us tonight. First off, in our news, at least 50 Palestinians were killed and dozens injured in a Zionist airstrikes across Gaza Strip since dawn Monday. Local medical sources reported that 19 were killed and others remain trapped under rubble in the attacks on homes in southern and central Gaza. 10 more were killed and over 30 wounded in a strike near a Tar gas station in Khan Yunis. In the Japanese neighborhood, 5 were killed and more injured after a home was leveled flat to the ground. Gaza's health ministry said hospitals received 100 bodies and 382 wounded in the past 24 hours alone. The total death toll from the ongoing Zionist assault has now reached 58,000 or 59,921, with 145,233 injured. In the same context, at least 14 Palestinians were killed on Monday in Zionist airstrikes targeting the starving population at 8 distribution centers across Gaza. The Nasser Medical Complex reported 5 deaths and several injuries near the Murat access in northern Rafah. Nine more were killed in separate massacres at the 8 sites. Gaza's health ministry said the number of martyrs from the attacks on 8 centers has now reached 1,157, with over 7,758 wounded. In the past 24 hours alone, hospitals received 25 bodies and more than 237 injured, mostly civilians waiting for food. To add to that note, Gaza's health ministry reported on Monday that 14 Palestinians, including children, died from starvation and malnutrition in the past 24 hours, bringing the total famine-related death toll to 147 since the occupation siege began. Nearly 60% of the victims were children. Meanwhile, the government media office in Gaza said Monday that over 40,000 babies under 1 year old face starvation due to the Zionist blockade on infant milk and supplies. It demanded crossings reopen immediately to allow formula and aid in, warning of mass infant fatalities.
There is an imminent risk of thousands of infants dying in Gaza due to the occupation's ban on baby formula. Over 40,000 babies under the age of 1 are at risk of slow death as a result of the criminal blockade. We urgently call for the unconditional opening of the crossings and the immediate entry of baby formula and humanitarian aid. We hold the occupation and all states complicit in the genocide, fully responsible for the loss of innocent lives caused by the siege.
In international reaction, the World Health Organization reported that Gaza faces alarming malnutrition levels, with a sharp rise in starvation-related deaths in June and July. Many victims showing severe emaciation were dead on arrival or died shortly after reaching health facilities. the UN agency said, blaming the deliberate obstruction of humanitarian aid. For his part, U.S. President Donald Trump acknowledged the reality of famine in Gaza, stating it can no longer be doubted. Speaking alongside British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Scotland, Trump placed primary responsibility on the Zionist occupation for blocking the flow of aid into the besieged tract.
I don't know. I mean, based on television, I would say not particularly, because those children look very hungry, but we're giving a lot of money and a lot of food. And other nations are now stepping up. I know that this nation is, right here.
The U.S. president confirmed that a ceasefire deal between Hamas and the Zionist occupation in Gaza remains possible.
And now possibly the fight will have to be a little bit different, but they have totally changed now. They don't want to give hostages. Very unfair. You have 20 living people. In this case, living. You have many dead people too that they want to get
a long time as well.
Yeah, they have 20 living people, and I told Israel, I told Bibi that you're going to have to now maybe do it a different way.
As the situation in the Strip keeps balancing back and forth, Hiba al-Ghamari clutches her 3 children as crowds swarm 8 trucks nearby. A daily scramble for survival in Gaza's Zionist-made famine. More with the Zahra Farjani.
Containers in hand, Palestinian families line up at one of Gaza's few remaining soup kitchens, desperate for a single meal. In a place where hunger grows faster than hope, food has become a fight for survival. Among them is Hiba al-Ghamari, a mother of 3. Every morning she sets out a painful journey from one soup kitchen to another, hoping to gather enough to feed her children. In the chaos of the crowds, she was burned by a pot of boiling food, a scar now added to the long list of wounds Gazans carry without treatment, without rest, and without help.
I go to the soup kitchen every day at 6:30 a.m. to find something to feed my children, and in the end, I got burned. I filled my container at the first soup kitchen, but it wasn't enough, just a pot like this one. So I went to a second one, but there was no bread left to take. My son wakes up every morning and says, I want bread. We are starving. I call on all Arab nations and the entire world to end this ongoing genocide. Planes are dropping aid, dropping flour from Zikim, but we haven't seen even a tiny amount of that flour. We received nothing from the aid that was dropped from the air.
In Gaza, every morning starts with empty stomachs and ends with deeper despair. For parents like Hiba, feeding a child is no longer a routine, it's a miracle.
I feel real joy when I manage to feed my child. I wish there was more food. I wish it was more nutritious, because what we have is barely edible. Does it meet our needs? By God, yesterday we went to bed with only water and salt in our stomachs, just like the days before.
Palestinians in the enclave no longer fear death, whether it comes from a missile, starvation, or even silence. It's not an end, but a release.
Still with the Middle East-related news, Algeria has called for an urgent, inclusive national dialogue and reconciliation in Syria to pave the way for lasting peace and stability. Speaking on behalf of the A3+ group of the UN Security Council, Algeria's UN envoy Ammar Benjama warned of Syria's fragile situation and condemned the recent surge in violence in Aswada. He urged a transparent investigation to ensure accountability for all incidents.
The
situation in Syria remains fragile, as demonstrated by the recent cycle of violence in Suwaida province. The A3+ firmly condemns all acts of violence against civilians and calls for thorough and transparent investigation into all incidents to ensure accountability for those responsible. These events underlined the urgent need for inclusive national dialogue and reconciliation to lay the foundation for lasting peace and stability in Syria. We take note of the announced ceasefire and urge all parties to honor their commitments in good faith. Past experiences have shown that agreements are only as effective as their implementation.
Algeria's UN envoy reaffirmed further the full support of the African Group and Guyana for a UN-led political process in Syria that meets the legitimate aspirations of its people. He also warned against making Syria an arena of conflict.
We reiterate our support for a Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political process, effectively facilitated by the United Nations and leading to a political transition that reflects the legitimate aspiration of all Syrians, including women and youth, and ensure their full participation in shaping the country's future. We renew our strong support for the United Nations and the efforts of the Special Envoy whose role remains crucial. Mr. President, the A3+ urges all regional and international actors to avoid turning Syria into an arena of confrontation and to instead contribute constructively to peace and recovery.
Speaking for the African Group and Guyana, the UN Security Council, Algeria's envoy strongly reaffirmed Syria's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity. The diplomat condemned the Zionist violations of Syrian sovereignty and stressed that the occupied Golan Heights remain Syrian territory.
We reaffirm our steadfast support for Syria's sovereignty, unity, independence, and territorial integrity, and we express serious concern over Israel's repeated violation of Syrian sovereignty. The A3+ strongly condemns such violation and the military operation being carried out in violation of international law, including Article 2 of the UN Charter. We call for the full implementation of the 1974 Disengagement Agreement and reiterate that the occupied Syrian Golan is Syrian territory.
All the way to Morocco now. The Moroccan Front for Supporting Palestine has renewed its call for an immediate end to end the ties with the Zionist entity, warning of grave consequences for the country. Speaking at a solidarity rally in Tangier, Mohammed Al-Sawaq, a senior member of the front, cautioned against Zionist infiltration into Morocco's health and education sectors and urged the cancellation of all agreements before it's too late.
However, despite the suspension of normalization, various forms of normalization are still ongoing in Morocco. The Moroccan authorities, institutions, including those in education and health, continue to be involved. We call on the public first, on news second, and on the Moroccan authorities to put an end to all forms of normalization in Morocco.
On a similar note, Moroccan activists revealed Sunday that the government is pressuring business leaders to invest in the occupied Palestinian territories through intimidation tactics. During an anti-normalization protest in Fez, they also denounced the rise in foreign currency smuggling to the Zionist entity, reportedly orchestrated by the government under the cover of economic normalization.
I appeal to the wise and active people in our country to put an end to this farce, the farce of normalization with the Zionist enemy. This normalization process must stop because Morocco is now in danger. Zionism has begun to infiltrate our institutions and threaten our investors. Our currency as well is now flowing out of Morocco to Israel.
Shifting focus to Algeria-related news, President Abdelmajid Tebboune presided on Monday over the annual ceremony honoring Algeria's top middle school and baccalaureate exam graduates. Attended by senior officials, ministers and families, the event saw the president awarding medals, gifts and financial prizes to the nation's highest performing students. At the closing ceremony, the honorees gathered for a family picture with President Abdelmajid Tebboune. For their part, the honorees expressed pride at being recognized by President Abdelmajid Tebboune and praised his commitment to advancing Algeria's educational system.
I was deeply honored today at the People's Palace to be recognized by the President of the Republic. This is a great honor for me, a powerful boost, and a strong step forward in my journey. It was a privilege to be honored alongside a group of outstanding and distinguished students. God willing, we will continue this journey with determination and positivity, representing Algeria with pride.
I sincerely thank the President of the Republic, the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, and the Minister of National Defense for organizing this special ceremony in recognition of academic excellence. I also extend my gratitude to the Ministry of National Defense and the High Command of the People's National Army for providing all the resources and support that enabled us to reach these high levels of achievement. To the youth of tomorrow, I encourage you all to follow this path of excellence, take inspiration from those who have succeeded, and strive to reach even greater heights.
On the economic front, on Monday, the Qatari dairy firm بخدمة الجزائر signed an initial package of contracts worth of $500 million to launch the first phase of its integrated agro-industrial project for dried milk production. Part of a $3.5 billion investment, the move marks the official start of a strategic project aimed at boosting food security, cutting import dependence, and supporting Algeria's national economy.
في تصميم مصنع إنتاج حليب نتخذ اليوم خطوة مفصلية في مسار إنجاز المشروع.
Today we're taking a pivotal step in the progress of a project that is among the largest in the world and the first of its kind in Algeria. This project embodies the fruit of a strategic partnership between the State of Qatar and the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria, represented by the National Investment Fund. The project spans an area of 117,000 hectares and will contribute to producing 50% of Algeria's national needs for dried milk.
Still in Africa, Sudan's military has started withdrawing troops from Khartoum's residential areas as part of a plan to limit security operations to police and intelligence forces. Transitional Sovereignty Council member Abdullah Yahya said the phased pull-out, including allied forces, will take 3 months, aiming to stabilize the capital and enable displaced residents to return. Meanwhile, the Arab League condemned what it called an attempt by the Rapid Support Forces-led coalition to impose an illegitimate government in Sudan, warning it undermines the country's unity and sovereignty. In a statement Sunday, the League denounced the move as a blatant challenge to the Sudanese people's will and a dangerous escalation that risks deepening the political and humanitarian crisis. It urged those behind the move to stop any unilateral actions that could further divide the Sudanese state. Still in Sudan, authorities in North Darfur have sounded the alarm over the worsening humanitarian crisis in Al Fasher amid intensifying clashes between the army and the rapid support forces. Governor Hafid Bakhit described the situation as unbearable and called for the immediate lifting of the siege on the city. To another topical development, reactions to the newly announced trade deal between Washington and Brussels expressed or exposed a clear European divide. Hungary called it a bad deal. Italy described it as a non-binding preliminary step, and France criticized the agreement as unbalanced. Yasin Richter reports.
Thank you very much.
A last-minute handshake sealed the provisional trade agreement between the EU and the United States. Narrowly avoiding a potentially devastating tariff escalation, the deal imposes a 15% tariff on most European exports to the US, with pharmaceutical products exempt. In return, the EU commits to $750 billion in energy purchases and $600 billion in additional investment in the US.
We are agreeing that the tariff straight across for automobiles and everything else will be a straight across tariff of 15%.
The deal also pledges to open its markets to tariff-free trade with the US and to buy a substantial amount of American military equipment. However, EU steel and aluminium exports will still face a steep 50% tariff, while US agricultural products will gain easier access to European markets. However, France denounced the new US-EU framework trade deal as a dark day for Europe. Prime Minister François Barrot's criticism highlighted France's long-standing push for a tougher EU stance, in contrast to Germany and Italy's more conciliatory approach.
It's a dark day when a coalition of free peoples who came together to affirm their values and defend their interests decides to surrender.
The agreement is seen as costly for the EU, particularly with its market opening up to American vehicles, a move that could provoke concern in automotive powerhouses like France and Germany. The high tariff levels have already sparked debate within the EU, with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and German Economy Minister Katharina Reich expressing cautious support and calling for more clarity on implementation.
It was signed yesterday. It is a preliminary agreement that is not legally binding, which means the further details are urgently needed. Some of its specific aspects, there is still a negotiating process to be undertaken. As a result of this agreement, austerity measures will be necessary, both of the national and European levels, which could be particularly painful due to the nature of this decision.
Though the 15% rate is lower than the 20% previously introduced by Donald Trump and far below the 30% he recently threatened, the deal still represents a significant concession for the EU.
It's time to catch up on more international news stories in the News in Brief with Salman Assad.
Thailand and Cambodia reached an agreement to implement an unconditional ceasefire within 24 hours. Speaking at a joint press conference with the leaders of Thailand and Cambodia after talks in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim announced that the deal calls for an immediate and unconditional halt to hostilities effective for midnight Monday. US President Donald Trump announced on Monday that he would shorten the 50-day deadline he had previously set for Russian President Vladimir Putin to end the war in Ukraine. Speaking during a meeting with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Western Scotland, Trump stated that he would now give his Russian counterpart roughly 10 to 20 days to bring the war in Ukraine to an end. Venezuela's electoral authorities announced that the ruling leftist coalition, led by President Nicolas Maduro, achieved a sweeping victory in the 2025 municipal elections, securing a majority in most major municipalities. The National Electoral Council stated that the results from 304 out of 335 municipalities, representing 90.74% of the total, show clear lead for the left-wing alliance. OPEC Plus expressed satisfaction with the strong and consistent commitment of most member countries to the agreed oil production cuts during May and June. In a statement following the 61st meeting of the Joint Ministerial Monitoring Committee, Algeria's Ministry of Energy and Mines said the committee praised efforts to strictly implement the cuts and compensate for any excess output, emphasizing that global oil market stability relies on collective commitment and unity within OPEC+.
With this, our news comes to a close for tonight. Check our social media platforms for more updates. I'm Islam Said, signing off. Thank you for watching and good night.